But how my dad got, I'll wait till he,
Good to go.
okay. When my dad started his own business, and he sold these small stores, and this one day, this lady who had a small store, was a nice customer, comes to my dad and said, they arrested their son, her son, for political activities, and her family says that he's a bum, and she needs 200 marks, which is today quite a few $1,000s, and she doesn't have the money to get him out of jail. He was 18 years old, I think, and so my dad said, don't worry about it, here's the 200 marks, and if you can pay it back, fine. If you can't pay it back, don't worry about it. And she said, oh no, I'm going to bring him in here, and I'm going to let him meet you, and I want him to know who got him out of jail. So she did that, and he had lost his own father in the First World War, this man. And so my dad arranged that he would get a job, not with him, but somewhere else, and would go to school also to become an accountant. And whenever he got paid, he came maybe once every 2 weeks for $1 or a mark, whatever it was. But he looked at my dad like his godfather. And they became very close, and my dad advised him that he shouldn't quit school, you know, and so you make less money now, but it'll pay, and all of that, and so forth and so on. So he went through college and got his CPA, and through some miracle, he did have to join the Nazi party, and he's the man who got my dad out of concentration camp. And so my dad kept in touch with him after the war, and he went back to Munich probably, well, we left in 38, 48, probably 20 years before he had enough. He didn't ever want to go back. But the people bought his business. He never saw a penny. And then he had property that people never paid for, apartment buildings. And he hired a lawyer who did nothing. So he said, well, the only way I'm going to get something out of it, I'm going to go back. So my mother and he went back for the summer, and he always loved the food. I mean, that was one of his, and fired the lawyer and met with this friend who got him out of concentration camp, and became very close with him and his family. And he went with him to the owner of the business that he bought, who was amazed that he was alive, can you imagine? And he did get money from him, which paid for his vacations. And because he said the building was hit from American or British, and he tried to get out of it, and my dad said, I tell you what, he wanted his son to come to America to learn about America. I will take care of your son for a year if you will pay me what you owe me. So the son came and worked for us. He was a real Nazi. He was too young, but a real. And then they deposited the money in Germany, and my dad said, at least I get free vacations, which was great. And when he saw him the last time, he was at his funeral. He got very sick and he died. So the whole cycle, you know, how things go in life.
What was the guy's name? The CPA? Do you remember his name?
I don't want that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's he still has a lot of family
Okay.
and children. But what else did you ask me?
I understand from stories I've heard that your parents and family hired a lot of other refugees and even survivors after the war.
Yeah. Okay.
Was that a part of the just the help paying forward, or what was?
Well, you know, Dad couldn't get a job. So when he started a business, luckily he had a friend in Denver who came over probably 5-6 years before we did. They were good friends in Germany. And he started a very similar business. So my dad asked him if he would buy merchandise, because he had credit, we had no credit, but ship it to us. And they knew each other so well that he had no fear that Dad would pay for it. And so that's really how we got started in the apartment. And then after I was deferred from the service, we moved downtown in the old Krippendorf shoe factory. It's 7th and Broadway. No, Sycamore. And so he needed additional help. And he said, I will only hire refugees, because they have such a hard time getting a job in America at that time. So the first 12 people that he hired either came from Germany, Poland, Russia, Egypt, Greece, and the one man from Greece who was just our packer, he didn't want to, we offered him different job, spoke 12 languages. So we had all these refugees work with him to learn English. And I still remember the man from Egypt, he spoke a little English, but he spoke Egyptian. Well, he spoke Egyptian. So he became an accountant for us. So, and the packer, and so it was amazing, but these people gave us 150%, not just 100%. I mean, they didn't want overtime, and they were so exact because we had to build up our reputation. And if an order wasn't ready by Friday, well, we worked Saturday at that time too, they would come in Sundays or evenings. It was the right thing to do, and my dad felt really good about it. And our salespeople, the first 5 or 6 were all Europeans who knew how to work hard and how to charm the customer. And there's still one salesman's wife in Kansas City. She's 94 or 5 now. She keeps in touch with me. She asked me how to invest her money. Her husband lived to be 90. He passed away maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I went to his funeral. So I was very close to my employees. We were really like a family, you know, and I knew their children, I knew their wives, and it helped. And I would not hire a salesperson without meeting his wife, because if she didn't like him traveling, at that time we traveled 5 days a week. We didn't have planes and couldn't afford to come back. And so if she wasn't sure she would like it, I wouldn't hire him. That paid off. Today you couldn't dare ask somebody, you know. It was a different world. But, and I took good care of my people. We still do.
What about your family?
My family.
What do you have here now?
That's a tough one. I was married 62 years. We lived in that apartment building that I mentioned to you. And it was mostly Jewish people that lived there. And when I was 18, I got an invitation from a friend of my sister's that she's having a New Year's Eve party, and she matched up 12 couples. She sent me an invitation that my date is Joyce. She sent Joyce an invitation that her date is Paul. And Paul, she asked Paul to call her and to make sure that we both want to go to the party. She was German, Jewish, and she was 3 or 4 years older than I was. And I had my physical for the army on December 13th. And I said, if I get drafted, I probably have to go in 2 weeks. I won't call her. I mean, I'll let her know, but I won't call her now. When I was deferred from the army, I called her, and I had no idea she was 15 years old, you know. And I said, look, I don't want to ruin your New Year's Eve, and I don't want to ruin mine. I'd like to meet you beforehand. But she never had a date. She went to parties, but never had a one-on-one date. And her very strict parents, very strict mother. Father wasn't as strict as the mother. And so she said, well, I have to ask my parents. I said, maybe we could go to a movie and we could meet each other. So, and I was, at that time, I didn't mention it, stuttering. Because when I hit Ellis Island, I started to stutter. And it was very difficult for me to call a girl or to talk, period. I couldn't say anything with a D. I couldn't say dozens. We sold everything by the dozens. So I said 12 sheets is so much. Well, how much is a dozen? You know? So, and I had tried to make a date with a few other girls from school, Jewish girls, and there were 8th grade girls, and they said, one said, I don't go with a refugee. Another one said, do you have a car? And I had a company car, but I said, no, I don't go with anybody that doesn't have a car. I said, well, then I wouldn't want to go with you either. And just, you know, foreigner, the impression that you get. So Joyce didn't ask me any of that. And so I called her back, and she said, yes, but my parents would like to meet me before we go. I said, that's no problem. So, you won't believe this. She opened the door, and I knew she was the one. I mean, she was 15 years old. I still remember what she wore. And she never believed me either. So I met her parents, and which were lovely people. They had a grocery store. She lived in an apartment. And we walk out, and I had borrowed the company car. And I asked her how to get to, you ever hear of Knowlton's Corner? That was a movie there. And she lived on Dana Avenue. Well, we have to walk up to Reading Road, take a streetcar on Reading Road, transfer, and take another bus or streetcar to get to Knowlton's Corner. I said, you know what? It's a little bit easier. I have my dad's car. So she got mad at me. Why did you ask me if you knew you're going to go by car? I said, well, and I told her, I said, I wanted to know if you checked if I have a car. I told her the reason. And so she was okay with that then. So we went to the movie. Then we went to Howard Johnson's ice cream place. And this was in 40. All they served was sherbet because you couldn't get milk. And we talked for maybe 2 hours, and I never stuttered because she never interrupted me. You know, people have a tendency, if you talk to somebody that stutters, they want to finish your sentence. That's the worst thing you can do. So she just very quietly listened. And, you know, I told her that I had problem stuttering, but I never stuttered. So that was another sign that she was meant for me. She was beautiful. Took her home and asked her if she'd like to go to the party. And she said yes. So we went to the party, and they had mistletoe up. And it was snowing outside on New Year's Eve. So we went outside and we had, you know, played in the snow and all that. It was great. We go back in the house, and I asked her if I could give her a kiss. She said, no, I want to be 16 and never been kissed. So I gave her a hug on the cheek. It just shows you how the world has changed, huh? And I would call her, And but since she never had dated before, her mother did not want her to see me too often. And I was traveling then for my dad, but I came home weekends. So I said, could I see you this weekend? And she'd ask her mother, and she said no. So I could only see her every third weekend. And I did. But as we saw each other more, and then, yeah, this, you'll get a kick out of that. She dated then, and I dated. And when we see each other, we would compare notes. I had such a terrible time with X. And she said, you know, John, he was just terrible. So we were both having a terrible time, but we were dating others. And so that was interesting. And then 2 years later, I took a trip to California with my two cousins. And she wrote me every day, and I wrote her every day. And when I came home from this trip, we knew we were going to get married. However, my dad said, I don't want you to marry an American girl. Forget about being Jewish. I said, why? Well, this land in court where all the Jewish people were living, he knew quite a few. And one of their sons got married to an American girl and lived in Landing Court. So he asked my dad, I want you to meet my wife. Why don't you come up or down, whatever, there are 3-story buildings. And he walked in the apartments. The kitchen was a mess. The bed wasn't made. So he assumed that all American girls are terrible housekeepers. So he definitely, and he was very strong-headed and very German. But my mother was quite different. And so I would continue to see her, and neither one of my parents, well, my mother drove, but my dad wouldn't drive with her because she was not a very good driver. So I would drive them. They went to the concert every Saturday night, and I would drive them to the concert and took Joyce with me. And then we would go to a movie and pick him up and bring him home. And Dad would, was very cordial to her, and never mentioned her anymore. And then my mother, we had Friday night dinner at their house every Friday night, my sister, who had 5 children. And she said, would you like to invite Joyce? She wanted my dad to meet Joyce and get to know her because she loved her. And I said, I'll ask her. So Joyce came Friday nights, and so Dad got to know her. And the end of the story is, Joyce and I was 21 and she was 18. Yeah, she was 18. We decided we're going to get married. And I said, I've never done anything against my parents' wishes. And Europe, you don't do anything against your parents' wishes. But this time, I'm going to tell my dad that we're getting engaged at her birthday and get married 6 months later. She said, you really? I said, yeah, I wouldn't want anybody else. And we both dated in between, but it wasn't the thing. And so I take my dad to the train station, and there I'm all nervous because I'm going to tell my dad I'm going to get engaged. And I said, Dad, I want to tell you something. And he says, now what? I said, Joyce and I, and this and this, and we want to get engaged. We want your blessings. What did he say? You make me very happy. But you think he would have said anything before that? That's a German. Was I happy? Go on the phone and call up Joyce. And so he was very happy, and he loved her. I always say he loved her more than his own daughter. Then she went to university and she learned German because my dad brought his sister over to Cincinnati, and she and her husband spoke very little English. And then my mother's mother was living with us, and she didn't speak very much English either. And she didn't want people to talk about her without knowing what they're saying. And the professor in college said, you're tremendous. Why are you such interested in German? She says, I have a German boyfriend, and I want to know what his family talks about. And she wrote my dad a German letter when he went to New York on one of his business trips, telling her how much she loved me and how much she appreciated that he gave a blessing in German. She wrote the letter in German, and he showed the letter to all his German friends. This is who my son is going to marry. You know? So that's how we had a wedding, and she worked for an insurance company. And then after 3 years, we decided we're going to have a family. And we were lucky, we had 3 sons. After 2 sons, I said I want a little girl. And that turned out a little boy. And I said, well, let's try it once more, maybe we're going to have a little girl. So we had friends that had moved to New York who also had 3 boys, same age as ours, and she was pregnant. And she said, well, let's see what they're going to have. Twin boys. So that was the end of it. She said, no, we're not going to try it again. Anyhow, she was a wonderful, wonderful, giving person. I was very lucky.
And how many grandchildren do you have?
8. 8 grandchildren. And my son in Atlanta has 3 boys. Gary has 2 daughters and a boy. And Mark has 1 of each. So I'm very lucky. Been very lucky in many, many things. You know, I'm such a trusting person in God. Because when I took over the business, and the many major decisions, and somehow God told me what to do. My children don't believe that. But, you know, why did you do that? I said, I don't know, but somebody told me to do it. You know, and we have certain systems in our business that really helped us. And how did you come up with a system? God told me. And different products. And so I'm a strong believer. And I'm a strong believer if you do well for other people, it comes back to you double. And my dad proved that. You know, if he wouldn't have helped that man, he wouldn't have come out of Dachau and we wouldn't be here. And he enjoyed, I mean, he did so much for so many people because he was so fortunate that his business grew and he made money and he shared it. And so there's a lot of things happen in our life that were meant to be.
What do you think, I have one more question for you. What do you think do you think there's any lesson that we can learn, or that we should learn, from the experiences that you went through? What can we learn from this?
Well, I think what we learn is this, that the trainer where I have my horses, he's a very religious Christian person. He believes very strongly in God. And he always tells me, he says, Paul, you're so lucky that you're one of the chosen people. And I said, well, you're just as lucky. Look what you have established. Yeah, but the Jewish people, they are the lucky ones. I said, maybe sometimes somebody else should be that chosen and be that lucky. But I think the biggest thing that I can share is live and let live. Don't only take care of yourself. We're not brought into this world to take care of ourselves. We're brought to this world to take care of our fellow Jewish people who are not as fortunate. I mean, opening a plant in Israel was a very difficult decision because we weren't making money heads over heels. But I wanted to help the Jewish people. And they all told me, we don't want charity, we want jobs. And when Gary and I traveled in different cities, and the mayor of Arad said, you know, we have a lot of newcomers coming here. We have a lot of Russian Jews coming. We have a lot of African Jews coming. We need jobs, we need jobs. And there isn't much, besides the Dead Sea, we don't have many jobs. And also the city manager was the shaliach in Cincinnati. And he really is the one that put the final touch on it and said, if you come to Arad, I will help you get established. What we didn't realize is that textiles need humidity. And Arad is very dry, being in the middle of the desert. So we had to put in a machine that creates humidity, because the yarn would keep breaking. It's too dry. But it was good for us, and we employed, at the height, we employed 1,200 people. Now they don't need us anymore because they now want to go into computers and other things. But at that time, we had no problem getting help. And we expanded, and we did everything in Arad. And we took care of people. And here in Cincinnati, I took care of a lot of refugees. We have a wonderful profit-sharing plan. And many years I put 25% of our profit into profit sharing for the people. And when I see them now, quite a few of them are in Florida. My assistant retired at 60. He's now 82. He says, I could have never retired that early if it wouldn't have been for you. And so sharing our good fortune with the rest of our people is what we should be doing. And the problem with the world is we're too selfish. Our government is too selfish. All they think about is, I want to be re-elected. Well, think about the people. No, we don't care about the people. Let them go without a job. So that, to me, is very frustrating. But what I can tell the world is, live and let live, and you'll benefit, and the rest of your people will benefit. That is it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just hope that more people do it. You know, it's just the selfishness of the people is just terrible. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And I see it. I mean, we have a lot of people that because we give to them, they give to others, and right. I enjoy helping others. You know, I mean, that's the biggest enjoyment we have in life, in helping others. You know, I mean, you take care of yourself, that's great, but help the next one next to you. That's what you're doing. You're helping a lot of people. Anyhow, thank you, guys.
Thank you.